Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So in this session, I am going to explain about the concept of serializability. In this session, I am going to explain the concept of serializability. So before going to explain the concept of serializability, before entering to the serializability concept, we have to understand that what is meant by concurrent execution, what is meant by concurrency control actually. So in the transaction management, all the transactions are going to be executed at one time. All the transactions are going to be executed at one time. But to control that execution, we are going to apply some concurrency control mechanism. We are facing a lot of problems like read or write problems, or update problems, or transactional deletion problems also. To avoid that all the problems, we are going to use the concept called control mechanism, concurrency control mechanism. So after understanding this concept of concurrency control mechanism, we are going to understand this concept of serializability. So what is meant by serializability actually? So to serializability of the transactions, are nothing but scheduling the transactions one by one. So a collection of transactions become a schedule. That means you are allocating some particular moment of time or particular moment of space to execute the transactions. So all the transactions are going to be scheduled. You have to schedule the transaction for the first minute or second minute. So scheduling multiple transactions is necessary to maintain the execution order and to avoid the overlap of data operation is called as serializability. So serializability is nothing but scheduling all the transactions and maintain the execution order in a proper order to avoid the overlap of data operations. So if all the transactions are scheduled in serializable means all the transactions are overlapped together. So to avoid that overlapped manner, we are going to implement this concept called serializability. Serializability is nothing but indirectly we are saying that we are going to schedule the transactions serializable. So scheduling the transactions are serializable, sequential manner. So by maintaining that serializability, we can achieve that database consistency by do not applying overlap on based on the DML operations. So this is the concept called serializability. So scheduling the transactions one by one, executing the transactions one by one. So without overlapping of the data on the transactions, it is called as serializability. So here serial schedule both by definition and execution means that the transactions processed upon it will take place serially, that is one after another. So the serializability means the transactions are executed or scheduled one by one or one after another. So this leaves no place for inconsistency within the databases. So by maintaining this serializable concept, there is no problems will occur like inconsistency problems will not occur. So but when a set of transactions are scheduled not serially, they are interleaved, leading to the problem of concurrency within the database. So concurrency of the database is going to be have the problem. So when a set of transactions are scheduled non-serially means not sequentially, not one by one, they are all together overlapped to executing the transaction. So they are interleaved, leading to the problem of concurrency with the database. So non-serial schedules do not wait for one transaction to complete for the other one to begin. That means other transactions are not going to be wait to until the first transaction is going to be executed. So all the transactions are going to be executed at the particular moment of time. So that is non-serial manner. Non-serial manner. So non-serial scheduling is nothing but so scheduling all the transactions to be executing for the one single time. So scheduling the all transactions are executing at single time. So that leads to inconsistency problem. That leads to inconsistency problem. So from this concept, we are going to understand that serializable means sequential manner. We are going to maintain the sequential manner one after another. But in the non-serial means they are not going to maintain one after another. They are maintaining like all together. They are maintaining like all together. That leads to overlapping problems. That is a database inconsistency problem also. So serializability in DBMS decides if an interleaved non-serial schedule is serializable or not. So interleaved non-serial schedule is serializable or not. Indirectly, is that related to serializability concept or not? We are going to understand here. So here the above diagram shows that this is a serializability of the concept. So here the transaction 1 scheduling the transactions 2, A1 and A2, and here the transaction 2 scheduling the transactions B1 and B2. Similarly here the order of the transaction for the schedule 2 that portrays an interleaved execution. So this is nothing but non-serial. That means one can take a space, interleaved space. After that, second one is going to be executed. And here one can take the space and other one is going to be executed next. So here the scheduling the transactions A1 and A2 are executed first. Then it takes some time and the next transaction 2 will be executed. So that means after executing the transaction 1 only, the transaction 2 is going to be executed. So that means they are scheduling with a serially, they are scheduling with a serial execution. So here the concept comes like serializability. So this diagram shows that serializability of the transactions are going to be executed. But here it is non-serial. Non-serial means the transaction 1 is going to be executed for the A1 process. After that, it takes transaction 2 is going to be executed. And again, it maintains some interleaved space. The transaction 1 of the third process is going to be executed. Again, it takes some interleaved space. After that, the transaction 2 of the process 4 is going to be executed. So, here from this diagram, the non-serialized schedules are going to be scheduled or transactions are executed at the interleaved point of time. So that is what we mentioned here. Order of the transaction for the schedule 2 that portrays an interleaved execution. Interleaved execution means that takes some time or that takes some space. After that only it is going to be executed. So consider two schedules here. From these two diagrams we are going to understand here two schedules, schedule 1 and schedule 2. So schedule 1 is a serial schedule consisting of transaction 1, transaction 2. Where in the operations on data item A, so this is an data item. So A1 and A2 are performed first and later. Operations are performed first and later. The operations on data item B, B1 and B2 are carried out serially. So first A1 and A2 are executed and then next B1 and B2 are executed. So they are executed serially. They are not taking any interleaved space. They are not taking any overlapping mechanism. They are serially executed. So they are followed serializability here. But schedule 2 is non-serial schedule consisting of transaction 1 and transaction 2 where in the operations are interleaved. So here we are saying that they are maintaining interleaved manner. So first this is executed A1 process and then next transaction 2 B1 process. Similarly transaction 1 A2 third process, transaction 2 B2 fourth process. So this is the way you can understand serializability of the schedules of the transactions from this diagram. And there are different types of serializability concept comes. So a schedule can be checked for serializability in one of the three methods. There are different types of methods are there. So in that, one is result equivalent schedule, first one, and the second one conflict equivalent schedule, and the third one view serializability, view equivalent schedule. Third one, view equivalent schedule. View equivalent schedule. So here the first one is what? Result equivalent schedule. So what is meant by result equivalent schedule? The two schedules S1 and S2 are set to result equivalent if they produce the same output obtained when the schedules are serially executed. If the two transactions are executed, two schedules are executed, serially executed, they produce the same output. They produce the same output obtained when these two schedules are serially executed. So that it's set to result equivalent schedule. Result equivalent schedule. So schedule 1 result and schedule 2 result. If both schedules or results are equivalent, then it is said to be result equivalent schedule. Result equivalent schedule. And the second one, conflict equivalent schedule. So conflict equivalent schedule, when either of a conflict operation such as read write or write read or write write is implemented on the same data item at the same time within the different transactions, then the schedule holding such transaction is said to be conflict schedules. So whenever you are scheduling the transactions with the operations of read or write operations, at that moment they are holding the conflicts like read or conflicts or write conflict. That means schedule 1 having the read problem and schedule 2 also having the read problem. At the same time they are facing those two operations. At the time read conflicts or write conflict will occur. So if the scheduled transaction Sched1 is performing a read operation and similarly schedule 2 is also performing with a read operation, then read conflicts will occur here. Read conflicts will occur here. So the read operation is going to be performed for either S1 or S2 actually. But here the two schedules are calling read operation at the same time. So here the read conflicts will occur. Similarly for the write conflicts. So here write conflicts will occur. So two schedules, one being serial schedule and another being non-serials, are said to be conflict serializable if the conflict operations in both the schedules are executed in the same order. That is what we said here. So look it out this example. So consider two schedules. One is schedule 1 and the second one is schedule 2. So schedule 1 contains transaction 1 and transaction 2. Similarly, schedule 2 contains transaction 1 and transaction 2. Here, the transaction 1 is going to be performing a read operation, so and then write operation. Similarly, transaction 1 is going to be performing with the write operation on A and read operation on A. Same attribute, same process is going to be performing either read operation or write operation. We don't know actually. The A wants to perform read operation or write operation. So at the same time, these two operations are going to be performed on the read and performed on the A process. So then conflicts will occur. So this is all the serializable schedule. All the schedules are serializable. Here all the schedules are non-serializable actually. But in the serializable, so here the performing read operation on A will leads to performing write operation on A. Similarly, performing a write operation on A and with a read operation on A from the transaction 2. Similarly, read operation on B and a write operation on B. So these two are scheduled as usual, serializable schedule, but related to these two, read of A and write of A. So read on transaction 1 A process and write on transaction 1 A process are going to be occurred conflicts. So these two during serial schedule, the read write conflict occurs one, and the second one is the write read conflicts occurs, and third one is the write conflicts occur. So there are three types of three conflicts will occur here, but they are scheduled serially, but they are getting conflicts. So this is one is a way we can say that conflict serializable schedule, conflicts equivalent schedule. And similarly, you can see from schedule 2 also. So transaction 1 performs read on A, and transaction 1 performs write on A, along with the transaction 2 write on A, transaction 2 along with read on A. So these two write conflicts will occur here. So write conflicts will occur. So they are scheduled interleaved manner. They are scheduled non-serial manner. They are maintaining some space, but conflicts will occur during the scheduling. The data items may be read-write problem and write-read problem and write conflicts. So these three conflicts will occur during this scheduling of the transaction 1 and transaction 2. So schedules are, one is serial schedule and the second one is non-serial schedule actually. But during this scheduling concept, the conflicts will occur. Read-write conflicts or write-write conflicts or write-read conflicts. So the conflicts will occur when the transactions are going to be executed or scheduled in the transactions. So this is called as what? Conflict equivalent schedules. The conflicts will be equal in both serial and non-serial schedules. Conflicts will occur in both serial and non-serial schedules. So this is the way we can understand from the conflict equivalent scheduling. And view equivalent. So view equivalent, you can see here, the diagram shows that schedule 1 and schedule 2 contains the transaction 1, transaction 2. So here the initial operation of data item A, transaction 1, from the transaction 1, so it is performing write read operation on A. Similarly, write read operation on B from the schedule 1 and transaction 1, transaction 2. And similarly from the schedule 2, initial operation of data item A, T1, that means initial operation of A, write A to read A, and initial operation of final operation of write A to write B to read B. So initial operation of data item A, transaction 1 from the transaction 1, initial operation of data item B from the transaction 1. So from the transaction 1. And similarly final operation of data item A, transaction 2, final operation of data item B, transaction 2. So that means number of operations from the schedule 1 and schedule 2 based on the transaction 1 and transaction 2. If the number of write or read operations are equivalent, then we can say that it is a view equivalent schedule. Then we can say that it is a view equivalent schedule. So we are going to see the result. We are going to see the result of the serial schedule as well as non-serial schedule. So in the serial schedule, we are having the same operations result 2, and in the non-serial schedule, we are having the same operations of the result 2. So that we can say that two schedules are producing the same output, then it is said to be view equivalent schedule. It is said to be view equivalent schedule. So here from this we can say that initial values of the data items involved within a schedule must be the same, and then final values of the data items involved within a schedule must be the same. So initial value should be the same, then next final values should be the same, and the number of write read operations performed must be equivalent of the schedules involved. So from this diagram we understand that what the initial operations of the data item must be the same, and the final operations of the data item must be the same, and the number of read or write or read operations must be the same. So all the schedules, all the serial schedule and non-serial schedule operations are equivalent. Then we can say that it is a view equivalent scheduling. View equivalent scheduling. So that is what we understand from this diagram. So from the above diagram, we conclude that the non-serial schedule 2 is considered as a view equivalent schedule 1 when the three rules of above are satisfied. When the three rules of view serializability are satisfied. So for the example shown, the initial transaction of read operation on the data items A and B both begin at T1, and final transaction of write operation on the data item A and B both ends T2, transaction 2. The number of updates from write read operations are 2 in both the cases, hence they are satisfying both schedule 1 and schedule 2 concept. Schedule 1 and schedule 2 concept. So here we have to see this, all the number of write to read operations and the number of read to write operations and the number of initial operations, number of final operations and the total number of operations, total number of write or read operations. They are all must be the same. Then it is said to be view equivalent schedule. View equivalent schedule. And here we can have some benefits of serializability in the BMS. So what are the benefits? So when we are doing the serializable concept, it automatically takes that the database is going to be consistent manner. Database is going to be consistent manner. So in the case of serial schedule, the multiple transactions involved are executed one after other sequentially with no overlap. No overlap. That means they are all not together. They are all not together. So this helps maintain the consistency of the database. Maintains the consistency of the database. But limits the scope of concurrency. Limits the scope of concurrency. It limits the scope of concurrency also. And often a smaller transaction might end up waiting for a long time due to an execution of previous longer transactions. So scheduling the transactions are one by one means if any scheduled transaction is having less number of size, then it has to wait for the previous transactions are scheduled. It has to wait up to previous transactions are scheduled. So that means a smaller transaction has to be wait for a certain longer time. Smaller transaction might have wait for a particular time. So that is one drawback from the serializable schedule. Serial schedule. So advantage means what? Advantage means here maintain the consistency is one advantage, and it limits the scope of concurrency also one advantage. But the disadvantage or limit is nothing but limitation. We can say that the limit is nothing but what? The transaction, whoever having the smaller amount of size, smaller size of the transaction has to wait for the previous scheduled transactions to be completed. Has to wait for the previous scheduled transactions to be completed. So that means it wait for a longer time. And also serial schedule also consumes a lot of CPU resources. So the CPU resources are allocated by the memory manager. The resources are allocated by the memory manager. So all the memory manager allocates the memory for the particular transactions to be scheduled or executed. So which gets wasted due to the serial execution. So it wasted some amount of space. The allocated space is more, but the transaction size is less. Then the allocated space is going to be wasted. So one is allocated space is wasted, and it might be wait for the longer time. So it is also one limitation or a drawback, we can say that, from the serial schedule or serializability. But in the case with non-serial schedule, the multiple transactions are executed interleaved, leading to inconsistency of the database. So that means all the transactions are overlapped together, so that it leads the problem of inconsistency of the database. But at the same time, it helps to overcome the disadvantage of serial schedule. That is meant by the transaction has to wait for a longer time, and it wastes the CPU resource. By utilizing the transaction's time, instance of the time, so it is not going to wait for a longer time. And such can be leads as concurrent execution. Also, we can say that non-serial scheduling is nothing but indirectly. Non-serial scheduling is indirectly, you can say that, concurrent execution. So it does not it does not having the wastage of the CPU resource, because it is not going to give the memory space to all the transactions. So all the transactions are overlapped together and utilizing the space itself. So once they are utilized, they can leave the space. Once they are utilized, they can leave the space. So it limits the wastage of CPU resources, as well as it limits the transaction execution time. It limits the transaction execution time. So it is not going to be waiting for the longer time to executing the transaction. So the advantage from the serial schedule is what? Maintaining the consistency and limits the scope of concurrency. But the drawbacks is what? Waiting for the longer time for the transaction executed and consumes lot of CPU resource. Similarly, in the case of non-serial schedule, the multiple transactions are executed overlapped manner, so leads to database inconsistent problem. One is problem, but the advantages is what? It has overcome the CPU wastage of the CPU resource, as well as does not waiting for the transaction executed at the moment of last transaction. So this is the benefits of serializability and serializability in DBMS. This is the benefits of serializability in DBMS. And what we are understanding from this session is what? So the first one is what? Concept of serializability. So what is meant by serializable actually? So the serializable is nothing but scheduling the transactions. Scheduling the transactions are one by one manner. Scheduling the transactions are one by one manner. That is nothing but one by one manner is nothing but sequential manner, one after another. So that is nothing but a serializable. But non-serializable means all the transactions are going to be overlapped together. So there is no space are applied for the transactions. So that is nothing but serializability. So here the examples of serializability, how serializable will occur. So how the serializable concept will occur here. The schedule 1 is going to be scheduling the transactions, transaction 1 and transaction 2, and schedule 2 is going to be non-scheduling operations. So here the transaction 1 and transaction 2 both are scheduling the processes A1, A2 and B1, B2 in the serializable manner. And the schedule 2 is going to be schedule the processes A1, B1 and A2, B2 from the transaction 1 and transaction 2 in an interleaved manner. So in an interleaved manner, that means non-serial manner. So from this diagram we can understand that the serial schedules are serializable scheduling means scheduling the transactions are one by one. So one after another. But in the non-serial scheduling means they are taking interleaved space. After that they are going to be executed all together itself. And there are different types of serializability concept will occurs. There are different types of serializability concept will comes here. The first one is the result equivalent schedule. So result equivalent schedule, it says that the scheduling transactions are said to be result equivalent if and only if the same output is obtained from the two scheduled transactions. Two scheduled transactions has to produce the same output. And the conflict equivalent schedule. So when the two scheduled transactions are going to be executed, both serial and non-serial, then the read or write conflicts will occur. So whenever scheduling the transaction 1 in sequential manner or serial manner, whenever the transactions are executed in non-serial manner, they are both performing with the read or write operations. So at that moment, the read or write conflicts will occur. So these conflicts are equivalent to both schedules, schedule 1 and schedule 2. Then it is said to be conflict equivalent schedule. And next, third one, view equivalent schedule. So view equivalent schedule means the scheduling the transactions are together, and the initial operation of the scheduling transaction Final operations of the scheduling transaction and the number of read or write operations performed on the transactions are must be the same. So one is what? Initial operations must be the same, final operations must be the same, and the number of write read operations are must be the same. Then it is said to be view equivalent schedule. View equivalent schedule. So this is what equivalent schedule types. So what are those? One is the result equivalent schedule, and the second one is conflicts equivalent schedule, and the third one is what? Third one is view equivalent schedule. These three are the equivalent schedule types, serializability types, and the benefits of the serializability. Benefits of the serializability. So in the serializability, as per the serializability concept, it maintains the consistency is the advantage in the serial scheduling. But in the non-serial scheduling, the inconsistency of the database leads to interleaved manner. So it helps to overcoming the advantages of the serial schedule, and the disadvantage of the serial schedule, it is going to be overcomes. So what are the disadvantages of the serial schedule means? One is waiting for longer time, and one is waiting for the longer time and consumes a lot of CPU resource. So waiting for the long time is one disadvantage. Consuming a lot of CPU resources is one disadvantage from the serialized schedule. But the advantage is what? Maintain the consistency and limits the scope of concurrency. These two are the advantages. But in the non-serial schedule manner, the advantage is what? It helps to maintain the timing. That means it is not going to wait for the longer time, and it does not waste the CPU resources also. But disadvantage means inconsistency of the database because of overlapping the transactions. So these are all the benefits and drawbacks of the serializability concepts. So the serializability comes in two ways. One is serial scheduling and non-serial scheduling. So non-serial scheduling is nothing but indirectly you can say that concurrent execution. So this is the way we have to understand from the concept of serializability, serial scheduling and non-serial scheduling, and the types of serializability concept. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.